Hi students, welcome you all. Today I am going to brief you a virtual demo how an HPLC instrument look like. If you see the instrument is in front of you, it's very simple, and if you think that it is very complicated, I am sorry, it is very simple instrument and it is a layman. That means a person who is not educated can also operate such instruments. Such instrument is called as HPLC. Suppose if you go to any farmer, near a farmer, he operates a pump daily to water his land. Similarly, we also operate pumps. So that is what the high performance liquid chromatography, HPLC. That means you use pumps to flow the mobile phase onto the column. This is the fundamental of your instrumentation. It's as simple as you are farming a crop with pump. This is the fundamental of today's lecture. And before going into the today's lecture, I'm already taught you a lecture on theory of chromatography. If anybody has not viewed that lecture, go to the lecture of theory of chromatography and clear all your doubts based upon your chromatographic principle. Here I am going to demo you only the instrumentation part and how you operate an instrument and what are all the essential factors you take before going into any instrumentation part. So suppose if you see the instrument, it contains several compartments. Suppose the first compartment is your solvent reservoirs. This is my solvent A and this is my solvent B. Okay, next comes is your pumps. So it's based upon your instrumentation. Suppose if you have only a binary pumps, that means only two pumps is there. Suppose sometimes you have a quaternary pumps, that means 4 pumps are there. So it depends upon what type of instrument you are having and what type of analysis you are going to do. Suppose you are going to do isocratic system. What do you mean by isocratic? Where there is uniform flow of mobile phase from the beginning to the end. That system is called as an isocratic flow. So in isocratic flow, you do not require multiple pumps. You have only one pump and your mobile phase is fixed already and it continuously flows until your analysis is complete. Whereas if you are doing gradient system, what do you mean by gradient? Gradually you are increasing the strength of mobile phase. In such cases, you require pumps. Now in the gradually increasing the strength of the mobile phase, it is also two types. One is linear gradient, or sometimes you get a steep gradient. All of a sudden you raise the gradiency of your flow. Then how and what is important parameter in this instrument is your pumps, which tells you how your instrument is operating, whether it is a binary pump, whether it is a quaternary pump, whether it is a gradient, whether it is an isocratic system. However, the heart of the chromatography lies in your column, that is your column part of your instrument. Here the column is demoed in terms of your two markers. This is the column which is fixed. So what exactly we are going to see here is you operate the instrument either by the system or by directly onto the instrument. Also you have buttons you can press. So what are all the things you can regulate in an HPLC instrument is flow rate. So how well your mobile phase is flowing. That means it can flow by 0.5, it can flow by 1 ml, it can flow by 1.5, it can go by 2, it can go by 5 ml. But higher flow rates are always not recommended. The flow should not be more than 2 ml if you are going for the HPLCs and UPLC. Now what is HPLC? High performance liquid chromatography. Then if you term with UPLC, ultra performance liquid chromatography. Now you go for UFLC, ultra fast liquid chromatography. Why there is a name change? Whenever there is a change in name of an instrumentation, that means its performance is increasing from HPLC to UPLC. That means there is a change in column parameters as well as the pressure at which there is separation. That means the particle size in the column are very minimum, that is very smaller, and the pressure at which the instrument is operating is very high. This is the fundamental, so that your separation of components is faster and elution is very fast. So this is the fundamental in your chromatographic system. So what basically, before going into the any instrumentation part, everyone has to know you have to filter your mobile phase before starting your instruments. So always the mobile phase are to be filtered by using the filters which are provided. That is, here now I have a filter that is nylon filter. Sometimes you have a nitrocellulose filters. Now the difference is how well your pore size is from which you are filtering your sample. So why we are filtering? Because upon long storage, the mobile phase develops some amount of microbials in them. That microbial culture will choke the column. Once the column is choked, the flow of mobile phase is restricted and you cannot use the column. In order to increase the life of the column, it is always advised that your mobile phase should be filtered prior to the analysis. Now, how you will filter is, you have a basic diagram of your filtration apparatus. This is your filtration apparatus, where at the junction you place your filter that is either 0.45 micron or 0.22 microns. Once you place your filter, whatever your mobile phase is there, that you pass from here and it gets filtered, and the filtrate you use in your analysis, and the discs which you are using for the analysis, you discard them. This is the fundamental in filtration in your HPLC instruments. However, the mobile phase, even though you procure, that is HPLC grade solvents, even though you do whatever the solvent grade, the solvents are to be filtered prior to the analysis. This is the fundamental part of your instrument. Once your filtration is done, you fill your mobile phase into your reservoirs, and here the reservoirs will also have some discs, so that which can be able to filter, that is pre-filter your analysis mobile phase before it passes on to the column. This is the one more fundamental. Now I am placing my the pipes that is into the mobile phase. Now it is inside the mobile phase. Now I will set my mobile phase as 1 ml. Okay. Now what else I can set? Now what are the parameters which you are setting is, one is your flow rate, one is your type of detector. Suppose you have an UV detector, the wavelength at which you have your sample can be analyzed, that is either at 254 or 240 or 225 based upon your characteristic of your analysis of. Suppose this is my compound, this is almost all colored, so it can be either it can be analyzed at UV or either it can be visible wavelength. So I can simply give 256 nanometers as my standard parameter because of its characteristics of that compound. So one is the wavelength, second one is your flow rate. Again, the next most important part is you have an additional part that is called column movement. So whenever you have a bad chromatogram, either because of tailing and fronting, the column portion which is free outside, that can be placed inside the column oven. Now by passing the column into the column oven, which can be heated up to 70 degrees centigrade, what happens by heating this column is the analyte, that is your compound which you are separating, which is adhered onto your stationary phase, will get eluted from the stationary phase by the application of heat. So in such cases, you are applying two things. One is your standard elution by liquid chromatography, as well as you are heating the compound to certain part of your gas chromatography is also be done in this technique. So again, you have once I feed the properties of mobile phase and wavelength, so this mobile phase goes from these pipes, and before entering into the column, so what happens is the mobile phase pass onto the God column. The blue one which is shown here is your God column. What happens is this God column protects the life of the mobile phase. Suppose what happens if you are not using God column, because any amount of particulate matter either in the mobile phase or in the any of the parts of your instrument that will choke the columns. So always you should use the God column prior to the column. The God column is smaller in dimension, which filters all the unwanted particles into the mobile phase. And the one more thing is, you need to always sonicate the mobile phase before you are using. Why there is a need of sonication is, once you sonicate, what are the amount of dissolved gases present in the mobile phase will go off. So if you do not desolvate or if you do not degas the mobile phase, what happens? There is bubbles generated in the column flow which will create some gaps into the mobile phase system and which will cause some fraudulent data, that is voids in your chromatogram, that is not acceptable in the spectrum. So always you should degas your mobile phase, you should filter it, and always you should pass to the God column before going on to the column. Now once it is going on to the column, now the mobile phase passes to the column and reaches to the, after the passing on to the column, it reaches to the detector part and it goes. So when there is no analyte injected, now what is passing in the column is simply the mobile phase. So that means now only the mobile phase is passing into the system as well as into the column. There is no analyte. So now I will get a chromatogram without any analyte. I will get a baseline. Now I should run the system in a such a time that at least 30 to 40 minutes, that if you are using for normal or reverse phase HPLC, suppose if you are using chiral HPLC, at least for 2 hours, you should run the mobile phase solvent such that you will get a clear baseline without any noise. So this is the fundamental information you need to know before running into the system. So once you acquire your baseline in your chromatogram, then it's time to inject your analyte. So here, now this is my compound of interest. I will filter this compound using my sample filters. Again, the sample filters, how I will do it? I have an syringe filters through which I will pass my sample, and whatever the filtrate I will get, that part I will inject onto the system. So here again, this has a pore size, either it is 0.45 micron or again it is 0.22 microns. It depends upon how clear is your analysis or analyte or sample for analysis. So now again, in the instrument there are some two different classification. One is your auto sampler. So another one is your manual sampling. So what is auto sampler is, the instrument contains vials which is already inside the instrument. So you fill your samples inside these vials and name them and place in the instrument. So these vials and the robotic present in the instrument itself, it directly takes the sample from each and every sample and pass on to the column. This part is called as a auto sampling HPLC. Whereas in the manual sampling part, you will inject the analyte through the rheodyne injectors. This is your rheodyne. So by these rheodyne injectors you will inject. Once you inject the sample, now the rheodyne has two parts. One is your load position and another one is your inject position. What do you mean by load position is, if I inject my sample into the system, this is what load position. So when the rheodyne is in load position, no sample is passing into the HPLC system. Only the mobile phase is passing. But whenever I change the rheodyne position from load to inject position, now that is I will just move it from the injectant to load to inject position. I will move my sample onto the column. Now whatever the things which I am flowing through the column will have two parts. One is your mobile phase as well as my analyte. Now based upon the affinity between the stationary phase and mobile phase, the components separate. Now once after passing through the column, it reaches to the detector and you will get a chromatogram on your system. This is the fundamental instrument. Again, there are several types of parameters. So this is your column of your interest. Now the columns are various types, that is normal phase column, reverse phase columns, chiral phase columns. So there are several columns are there. Now HPLC columns, UPLC columns. Now how these are differentiated? In a normal phase column, the stationary phase is filled with simple silica, and in a reverse phase column, the stationary phase is filled with a non-polar silica. What do you mean by non-polar? Increasing the carbon chain on a silica particle. This is the fundamental. So this one you have to read my chromatographic lectures. And in a chiral columns, you have a chiral stationary phase. Why we require a chiral stationary phase? Because the enantiomers cannot be separated by simple stationary phase. They require a chiral environment. That's why you have a stationary phase which is chiral in nature. Suppose you inject a racemic mixture, what happens? You have a one chiral stationary phase fixed. So one is retained, another one is eluted. After some time the other will also elute. So based upon the difference in RF value and the intensity, you identify what is the ratio of each enantiomers present in the racemic mixture. This is the fundamental part in your instrument. Now you completed your analysis. Now you have to clean your instrument. So to clean your instrument, you have to detach your column from the instrument part. So how you will detach? That means the column has two ends. That is, one end is fixed with an instrument ferrule and the other end is fixed with the detector ferrule. So two ferrules are there. One is from the pumps, the other is towards the detector. So now I will remove these two parts and two ends of the column, and I will cap them and fix aside. And now I will place a coupler. What is a coupler? Nothing, it's a coupling two pipes. It will couple two pipes. One pipe which is coming out from the pump and the other pipe which is going to the detector. That's it. And I will couple them and I will start the parameters in the instrument, so that I will run the mobile phase, that is 0.5 ml for around 2 to 3 hours, so that it will completely clean the system before my further analysis. However, you should always remember that after your analysis, you have certain amount of compound that might be possibly retained on your stationary phase. So at least at 40 to 50 minutes, you should run the complete mobile phase onto the stationary phase before you clean your system for analysis. So this is the fundamental part of your chromatography. Again, I will repeat today's lecture. The first part is you have pumps. The pumps are binary pumps or quaternary pumps or linear or gradient pumps. You have reservoirs. You have column. So you have a columns, and you have, and again you, whatever the HPLC room you are using, that is a clean room where the particles should not be more than 100 per square meters. Those is the fundamental, that is what are the, and you have a filters to filter your mobile phase as well as filter your sample, and you have a column oven. So you have a detectors. See, again detectors, there are various types of detectors. One is your UV detector, one is your fluorescence detector, one is the refractive index detector. There are several types of detectors present in the system. So which detector you need to use depends upon what type of analysis you are interested. You have some other detectors called electrochemical detector. Suppose there is change in oxidation or reduction, so you can even study by using electrochemical detectors. But what are the universal detectors? Refractive index detectors. So however, the refractive index detectors cannot be used for your gradient HPLC. For that you have evaporative light scattering detectors. What do you mean by evaporative light scattering detectors? Because all the mobile phase is evaporated before the analyte reach to the detector. This is the what is called ELSA, that is evaporative light scattering detector. This is the fundamental information of your chromatography. So basic parts, you have pumps. The pumps may be reciprocating pumps, piston pumps, that may be gradient, that may be binary pumps or quaternary pumps. You have a columns. Column, you have a polar, non-polar, chiral, or normal phase, reverse phase, mobile phase, depends upon your type of stationary phase. One more fundamental thing you need to remember is the solvents which you are using, they should be compatible to the columns which are used. Suppose if you are using a reverse phase column, always you should remember that the mobile phase can be acetonitrile and water. Suppose if you are using a normal phase column, your mobile phase should never contain the water in it. It should contain DCM and acetone. And again, if you are using chiral column, again here you have hexane, and there are several other solvents you can use in your analysis of your interest. So this is a fundamental. Now what is the hyphenated instruments? Hyphenation is connecting one or more instruments. Now this is HPLC instrument. Now whatever the output which is coming from the column, it is going into the detector. So if I will bifurcate the output into two parts, one part goes into the UV detector, the other part if I am connecting to a mass spectrometer, that is in a hyphenation, that is HPLC and MS. So this type of instrument is called as LC and MS. Now based upon the fragmentation pattern in the mass, we will identify what type of analyte you fed into the instrument. So this is the fundamental part of your simple liquid chromatography. I hope you all understand my lecture. So if you like, subscribe and share my lectures among your friends. Thank you. We'll come back with another lectures. This is Dushyant Reddy signing off for today. Meet you again on a new topic. Bye bye.